I'm John McKee, editor of Messianic Apologetics. Messianicapologetics.net. And I would like to welcome you to this episode of Messianic Insider, your theology and news roundup for January the 16th, 2026. Yesterday on our theology roundup, we began a two-part series on the Synagogue of Satan. And of course, this has been piqued because of the recent arson attack over last weekend in Jackson, Mississippi at Beth Israel Synagogue. And the perpetrator of the attack, Stephen Spencer Pittman, claimed that he had to do it because, after all, this was a synagogue of Satan. So with that in mind, a lot of people, we're not the only ones, but a lot of people out there have been addressing, well, what is the synagogue of Satan? Revelation 2:9, Revelation 3:9. So yesterday we discussed Revelation 3:9, the issue of the synagogue of Satan in Smyrna. Today we'll continue with part 2, addressing the issue of the synagogue of Satan in Philadelphia. And then we will discuss somewhat what various Messianic people have said, because there is some commentary on this. And this is something we need to have a much better handle on as a Messianic community, because as things get more and more unstable and uncertain, it is guaranteed that with rising anti-Semitism, rising anti-Zionism, you're going to hear a lot more people invoke the claim of synagogue of Satan, and how many of them have read these statements within some kind of ancient, late first, early second century context. How many people, and my own mother brought this up yesterday after our episode was over, how many people reading an English Bible? Well, when the Greek synagogue is used referring to a Jewish place of worship, is rendered as synagogue. But synagogue appears in other contexts, referring to a specific assembly, perhaps of ancient Messiah followers. Well, then it might be rendered as gathering or assembly, or other places it's not rendered as synagogue. Just being aware of that and being able to sort through the dimensions of that, knowing that the term synagogue had a definite pre-Jewish use as just meaning a gathering of something, whether it's a gathering of people, a gathering of sheep, it could be a gathering of sticks for all we care. Many people are unaware of that. And, Messianic leaders, rabbis, etc., have somewhat been at a loss. So hopefully a number of the things we sorted through yesterday have been very useful. Okay, let's get into our examination, part 2, on Revelation 3:9 and the issue of the synagogue of Satan and how it affected Philadelphia. All right, so if you go to the Messianic Apologetics website, here you see the FAQs tab. Click on Volume 2, and you'll see this is a listing of different frequently asked questions entries, the year 2022 to the present. We're putting these in a book file. There, it is not on a particular schedule. When the book file gets fat, that's when we'll do something. Scroll down to the letter S, of course. Synagogue of Satan. Click there, and then a PDF file will open up. And this is where we left off yesterday. Revelation 3:9 and Philadelphia. Behold, I will cause those of the synagogue of Satan, tes synagoges tu Satana, who say that they are Jews and are not, but lie. I will make them come and bow down at your feet and make them know that I have loved you. Revelation 3:9, New American Standard. Yeshua gave an important message to the assembly at Philadelphia. He asserted his sovereignty to them as one possessing the key of David, Revelation 3:7. He acknowledged how the Philadelphian believers had not denied him. Revelation 3:8. The Lord told the Philadelphian believers that those of the synagogue of Satan would be made to bow down to them. Revelation 3:9. Because of the Philadelphians' faithfulness, they will be spared from the hour of testing. Revelation 3:10. Yeshua said he was coming quickly. Revelation 3:11. And that overcomers will have a place in his future temple. Revelation 3:12 and 13. Aside from some of the debates which will ensue among pre- and post-tribulationists over being spared from the hour of testing, questions are necessarily raised involving how the ancient Philadelphian believers were negatively affected by a group labeled as tes synagogues tu Satana. An author's rendering of Revelation 3:9, taking into account the varied applications of synagogue, might be, behold, I cause those of the synagogue, and then in italics, or gathering of Satan, of those who say they are Jews, and they are not, but lie. Behold, I will make them come and bow down before your feet, and to know that I have loved you. Revelation 3:9, author's rendering. Also present within Revelation 3:9 are various intertextual allusions to Isaiah 43:4, 45:14, 49:23, 60 verse 14. How has the presence of the synagogue of Satan in Revelation 3:9 been approached in some theological examination? Frequently, because of the severity of the offense committed by this Satan synagogue, Kingdom New Testament, or congregation of Satan, the Richmond Latimer translation, toward the Philadelphian believers, it is included that these specific ancient Jews had forfeited the honor of being considered Jews. Specifically in view were the ancient Jews who dismissed the Messianic believers and who were responsible for persecuting the Messianic believers. Given the intertextual allusions to the Isaianic passages taken to involve a recognition by the nations of Israel's central place in God's kingdom, such Jews in view in Revelation 3:9 are thought to have advocated that only Jewish people had a place in the kingdom to come. The synagogue of Satan in view may be considered to be a false or illegitimate Judaism. Some are seen to conclude that while the synagogue of Satan was limited to Jewish people in ancient Philadelphia, true Jews are those who believe in Jesus as Messiah, likely per various approaches to Romans 2:28 and 29, inappropriately applied to non-Jewish people. Hence, people being quote-unquote Jewish might be thought to now include those who are ethnically non-Jewish. Among various resources, one can definitely detect sentiments of supersessionism or replacement theology for Revelation 3:9. One important matter all readers of Revelation 3:9 have to sort through is how Yeshua told the assembly at Philadelphia, behold, I will cause those of the synagogue of Satan who say they are Jewish and are not, but lie. Behold, I will cause them to come and bow down before your feet. Tree of Life version. What does it mean that those who were adversaries of the ancient Philadelphian believers would actually be seen to bow down before them? There are intertextual allusions to Isaiah 45:14 and 60 verse 14, which have to be taken into consideration here. Okay. Those passages. Thus says the Lord, The products of Egypt and the merchandise of Cush and the Sabaeans, men of stature, will come over to you and will be yours. They will walk behind you. They will come over in chains and will bow down to you. They will make supplication to you. Surely God is with you, and there is none else, no other God. Isaiah 45:14, New American Standard. The sons of those who afflicted you will come bowing to you, and all those who despised you will bow themselves at the soles of your feet, and they will call you the city of the Lord, the Zion of the Holy One of Israel. Isaiah 60, verse 14, New American Standard. These two major prophecies speak of those from the nations at large, recognizing the one God of Israel and bowing down to the people of Israel in honor, a major sign of restitution being made for past sins and crimes committed against Israel. If the offenders of Revelation 3:9 were those who were ethnically Jewish, as many interpreters do, but guilty of extreme offenses against the Philadelphian believers, so as to no longer be worthy of being considered Jewish, then bowing down to the Philadelphian believers would be somewhat of a reversal of what is witnessed in Isaiah 45:14 and 60, verse 14. Of course, a responsible reader of Revelation 3:9 would keep this relatively limited to the circumstances Yeshua addressed for the Philadelphian believers in the late 1st century CE. Those who read Revelation 3:9 principally for ancient circumstances in mind may note how there were continued tensions in Philadelphia between the Messiah followers and the local Jewish community. But if anyone expounds Judaism to you, do not listen to him, for it is better to hear about Christianity from a man who is circumcised than about Judaism from one who is not. Ignatius to the Philadelphians 6:1. That various commentators take the statements of Revelation 3:9 in a strong direction of supersessionism or replacement theology is something certainly witnessed. So we're going to go through a number of commentators here. George Eldon Ladd, quote, "The Jews have surrendered their role as the people of God because they have rejected their Messiah. In their place, the church, largely Gentile, has become the true Judaism, the new people of God. However, the Jews hate the church and were often the instruments of bringing persecution upon her. John looks forward to a day when the situation will be changed, when the Jews will acknowledge that the church is indeed the true people of God and will learn that I have loved you," unquote. Robert H. Mounts, quote, "The Jewish population was convinced that by national identity and religious heritage, it was the people of God. No, so claimed the Christians. Had not Paul taught, quoting Romans 2:28-29, it was the church that could now be called the Israel of God, Galatians 6:16, for the Jewish nation had forfeited that privilege by disbelief. Members of the local synagogue may claim to be Jews, but the very claim constitutes them liars," unquote. So, our approach toward Revelation 3:9 and its reference to the synagogue of Satan has to take into account what it meant for the believers in Philadelphia. While it is important to note how there was likely continued hostility by the 2nd century between the believers in the local Jewish synagogue in Philadelphia, more has to be taken into consideration regarding the intertextual references to Isaiah 45:14 and 60 verse 14 in Revelation 3:9. Is it possible that there were those who were ethnically Jewish whose persecution of the Messiah followers was so bad that they actually merited being reckoned among the synagogue of the adversary? Complete Jewish Study Bible. And indeed, that is ultimately where I think you're going to see difference of approach between some interpreters such as myself and what we're getting ready to examine with what different people have said in the Messianic Jewish sphere of influence. Because as we're going to see, many in the Messianic Jewish sphere of influence, yesterday we noted the martyrdom of Polycarp. We noted here the reference from Ignatius. We're trying to specifically read Revelation 2:9 and 3:9 from the perspective of the late 1st and early 2nd century. Whereas a lot of people in the Messianic Jewish sphere of influence, they really don't tend to expel the effort to do so. All right, so now getting back to our frequently asked question entry, the Synagogue of Satan and today's Messianic Judaism. What are some of the approaches witnessed within today's Messianic Judaism to the controversial issue of the Synagogue of Satan appearing in Revelation 2:9, 3:9? While it is seen that a number of approaches are not too engaged with the variance of opinions, per the analysis above, some observations on the issue of the Synagogue of Satan can actually come close. In his 2000, Answering Jewish Objections to Jesus, General and Historical Objections, Michael L. Brown summarized a number of approaches to this. So you see, this is rather general. Okay, quote, on the one hand, there is the possibility that the people to whom Yeshua referred and who are causing real hardship for these Christians in Smyrna and Philadelphia were actually not Jews at all. This would be similar to a modern-day cult such as the Black Hebrews. They strongly oppose both Jews and Christians and claim to be the real Jews, the true Israel, when in fact they are not. As to being called a synagogue, it is important to remember that the Greek word used here could simply mean a meeting place, as in James 2:2. On the other hand, it could well be that Yeshua was speaking of his own kinsmen, but using biting prophetic hyperbole, just as when the word said through the prophet Hosea, quoting Hosea 1:9, and again speaking of Israel as his wife, quoting Hosea 2:2. In both of these verses, God completely repudiates his people/wife Israel, only to immediately promise Israel's restoration. See Hosea 1:10, 2:16. The lesson we learn is that sometimes, when our people continually disobeyed the Lord and broke his covenant, he spoke of them as if they were not his people at all. In the same way, when the Messiah's own people actually tried to stop Gentiles from hearing about him, and this did happen, see e.g. Acts 14, 1-20, he could say of them, you claim to be Jews, but are not. You're really a meeting place of Satan. But that's so harsh, you say. Yes, it does seem harsh, but no harsher than the accusation in the Jewish Dead Sea Scrolls that Jews who opposed their Jewish group were part of the congregation of Belial. Belial was synonymous with Satan. And it is certainly a lot less harsh than the Talmudic claim that Jesus is now in hell burning in excrement. See Talmud Gittin 56b to 57a, unquote. So Michael Brown's examination just gives you a selection of options. Now, more frequently than not, though, there tends to be a huge gap between what is witnessed in more academic examination of the Revelation 2:9, 3:9 Synagogue of Satan and opinions observed within today's Messianic Judaism. Much of the common Messianic Jewish approach to the issue of the Synagogue of Satan is doubtlessly due to both historical and current anti-Semitic rhetoric issued against the Jewish community. The terminology, Synagogue of Satan, will frequently be employed by Messianic Jewish leaders and teachers to refer to non-Jewish groups, such as the two-house sub-movement, which claims that most non-Jewish people are members of the 10 lost tribes, and others which claim some kind of Israelite or Jewish ancestry, but have no empirical evidence to substantiate it. Common Messianic Jewish examination and use of Revelation 2:9, 9:3-9 is focused on defending the integrity of the Jewish people. It is not, however, too frequently engaged with any kind of background issues germane to Smyrna or Philadelphia, and what the statements against the synagogue of Satan meant to the believers of the late 1st or early 2nd centuries CE. A number of different options are fairly noted in the Jewish Voice International Ministries NIV 1st Century Study Bible, which is mainly the Kent Dobson version with some added appendices produced by Jewish Voice Ministries. In Dobson's annotation on Revelation 2:9, it states, quote, "It is difficult to be certain if John was denouncing Jews in the synagogue who were opposing the Jesus movement, or non-Jews, perhaps Jesus followers, who were claiming to be Jewish and to follow Judaism but were not. John was clearly a Jewish writer concerned with purity and separation from pagan culture. A common interpretation that John was denouncing Jews or Judaism wholesale is not obvious. It is only clear that he was condemning those who were compromising with pagan culture while claiming to be part of the synagogue. Deep criticism among different Jewish groups was not uncommon. The Dead Sea Scrolls community criticized other Jews who did not support their movement, calling them the congregation of Belial. Belial or Belial was a name associated with demons." Unquote. A prominent view of the synagogue of Satan one will encounter in Messianic Judaism. I know the insults of those who call themselves Jews but aren't. On the contrary, they are a synagogue of the adversary. Revelation 2:9, Complete Jewish Study Bible, is to take this as non-Jewish people of the circumcision faction, posing or pretending to be Jews. This is reflected in the annotation to Revelation 2:9 in the 2016 Complete Jewish Study Bible. Quote, "These are Gentiles who call themselves Jews but are not. On the contrary, they are a synagogue of Satan. Perhaps they were like the Gentiles of the circumcision faction in Galatia, who sought to force non-Jews into receiving circumcision in order to have a relationship with God, thus subjecting themselves and their followers to a legalistic perversion of the Torah. Historically, some have falsely equated Jewish and synagogue worship with this passage, excuse me, leading to anti-Semitism, when in fact it was most likely only the circumcision faction to which Yeshua via Yochanan John was referring." Unquote. This perspective is somewhat reflective in the annotation provided by David Frankfurter in the Jewish Annotated New Testament, concluding that those condemned in Revelation 2:9 were, quote, in context, Gentile members of Pauline congregations, unquote. It is further stated that, quote, "The traditional view that this is a condemnation of practicing Jews who do not believe in Jesus is not supported if Revelation is read as a Jewish text," unquote. Although it is noted how from 1QH 222 in the Dead Sea Scrolls, how the Essenes called fellow Jews a congregation of Belial. The entry for Satan in the New Interpreter's Dictionary of the Bible simply notes how in Revelation 2:9-3:9, quote, "the slanderers are falsely laying claim to being Jews," unquote. Commentators have proposed how those in Revelation 2:9 may have been various non-Jews pretending to be Jews, as Judaism was exempt from Caesar worship. In his Jewish New Testament commentary thoughts on Revelation 2:9, David H. Stern asserted how a straightforward reading of the text indicates how this was speaking of non-Jewish people pretending to be Jews. He largely concluded this on the basis of how any other approach to the synagogue of Satan has been the cause of extreme anti-Semitic acts over many centuries. Quote, virtually all commentators ignore the obvious and straightforward interpretation Yochanan, John, is talking here about Gentiles who pretend to be Jews. The same kind of expression is used in Revelation 2:2. It obviously refers to false apostles, and there the commentators accept the literal sense without demur. But here they opt for the metaphorical interpretation that Yochanan is talking about Jews who reject Yeshua as the Messiah, instead of the literal understanding that these are non-Jews who lie and say they are Jews, but in fact are Gentiles. In this way, a verse which says nothing about Jews is given a virulently anti-Semitic significance. The result is that over the centuries, Jews have had the epithet synagogue of Satan hurled at them by Christians who thought they understood the Bible. But nowhere in the New Testament are unbelieving Jews called non-Jews, nor does anything in the present context call for a violent outburst against Jews. A good rule of interpretation is that when the literal sense makes good sense, seek no other sense. The only explanation I can see for its nearly universal disregard in this case is the anti-Jewish mindset that infected the church, including theologians and commentators. Unquote. Stern then went on to detail some modern approaches to how various non-Jewish people or groups could claim to be Jewish, but in actuality are not. Quote, should it nevertheless be thought improbable that Gentiles would call themselves Jews, Hebrews, or Israelites, consider the following modern examples. The British Israelites regard the British as the 10 lost tribes. The Mormons not only consider themselves to be the 10 lost tribes, but regard themselves as Jews and everyone else, real Jews included, as Gentiles. A sect of mostly African-born blacks consider themselves the true Hebrews. Several thousand of them are living in Israel. All of these are outside the pale of Christianity. In addition, scattered about are well-meaning Gentile Christians whose strong identification with and love for the Jewish people has made them believe, without a shred of evidence, that they are actually Jewish themselves. See 1 Timothy 1:3b to 4 and his note, unquote. The influence of Stern's Jewish New Testament commentary here, while raising appropriate concerns, has led to how many Messianic Jewish leaders and teachers use the terminology synagogue of Satan from Revelation 2:9-3:9 to condemn the two-house submovement. This is a misapplication, given how non-Jewish people within the two-house submovement explicitly do not claim to be Jews or Jewish. They claim to be Israelites of the exiled northern kingdom of Ephraim. It is to be properly recognized, though, how these people are seen to often make these claims without empirical evidence, and many of them can be found to be at times anti-Jewish in their approach to Torah and tradition. A wide number of people identifying as two-house do compose, in a macro sense, a congregation of the adversary. But whether such a classification can legitimately originate from Revelation 2:9-3:9 is another issue altogether. While there is no uniform approach witnessed in Messianic Jewish examination to the synagogue of Satan issue of Revelation 2:9-3:9, more often than not, synagogue of Satan rhetoric will be applied to non-Jewish people somehow claiming to be Jewish, Israelite, or Hebrew in some form or fashion. Too much of contemporary Messianic Judaism's approach to the controversy of the synagogue of Satan is likely conditioned by centuries of anti-Semitic and anti-Jewish abuse of Revelation 2:9-3:9. disjointed from any original circumstances in ancient Smyrna or Philadelphia. We should expect the majority of Messianic Judaism to maintain an approach to the Synagogue of Satan and Revelation 2:9-9, oriented toward opposing centuries-old misuse and application, which has led to great persecution and tragedies in history, and not be too interested with various factors from the late 1st and early 2nd centuries CE. All right, and we're going to close with this. Ongoing challenges with approaching the Synagogue of Satan. The major ongoing issue regarding the Synagogue of Satan will be how to responsibly read and apply Revelation 2:9-9 in light of late 1st and early 2nd century CE issues, and not the collective Christian anti-Semitism of 2 millennia. For a wide number of contemporary Christians who often read the Holy Scriptures as though it were written directly to them in the 21st century, this will be an absolute impossibility. Sadly, because of how Revelation 2:9-9 has been inappropriately used to support extreme and violent acts of anti-Semitism and anti-Judaism over many centuries, it will likewise be almost impossible to see those within today's Messianic Jewish movement attempt to consider ancient background circumstances germane to Smyrna and Philadelphia, affecting the proper approach to the Synagogue of Satan. See especially the martyrdom of Polycarp 12:1-3, 13:1, 17:2, 18:1, which we addressed yesterday. For those who consider the Synagogue of Satan of Revelation 2:9-9 to be affected by ancient background circumstances, meaning that various Jews of Smyrna and Philadelphia committed offenses so badly in opposing the Messiah followers that they forfeited being considered Jewish by Yeshua. The need to be tempered in one's possible modern application of this for the 21st century is extraordinarily heavy. While there is a macro synagogue of Satan or gathering of Satan composing all of the accuser's forces, it is entirely irresponsible and indeed anti-Semitic to claim that all Jewish non-believers would compose the synagogue of Satan. Those who are directly and actively involved in opposing the spread of the good news or gospel, such as those of the anti-missionary movement, may indeed be said to constitute a gathering of the adversary. The significant majority of Jewish, non-Jewish believers in the West, at least, want to coexist with their Christian neighbors and even Messianic Jewish neighbors, and are not proactively involved in seeing their religious activities halted. So, this concludes our discussion on the Synagogue of Satan. And once again, you got to go back and read the FAQ, listen or watch this again. The main challenge is going to be, how do we, as today's Messianic community, factor in, number one, the fact that the Greek synagogue, in its most neutral context, just means a gathering, and it had a pre-Jewish usage seen throughout Hellenistic classicism. Likewise, what do you do with some of these ancient, Christian factors, the martyrdom of Polycarp, Ignatius to the Philadelphians, where there was definitely hostility expressed in Smyrna and Philadelphia to the Messiah followers by the Jewish community? How do we orient ourselves to some kind of late 1st, early 2nd century setting for Yeshua's statements? I don't think it's going to be very easy for today's Messianic community. And indeed, when I have mentioned, well, what do you about the martyrdom of Polycarp, especially, that just people just kind of go into this daze. And it's because of how there have been centuries of misuse, misapplication, and it's understandable that today's Messianic Jews simply want to defend Jewish integrity. But for the rest of us, we have to follow that simple yet complicated rule of biblical interpretation, interpret a passage for its original audience first, and then deduce modern applications. And while there are Jewish people who actively oppose the work of the good news, the gospel, and they definitely may be reckoned as being part of the adversary's forces, that should not be applied to Jewish people across the spectrum. Many Jewish people, they want good relations with their Christian neighbors. They see them as friends. They see them as potential allies. And one needs to be very restricted in how he or she approaches Revelation 2:9, 3:9, and applying it for today. But as you can see, I definitely have a different approach to these passages than some of the people you have probably heard within the Messianic sphere of influence. And it is unfortunate that we have to discuss this because of current events, rising anti-Semitism, rising anti-Zionism, and it's just really bad. But unfortunately, that is the world in which we live today. And it's only going to get worse and more complicated, I suspect. Okay, so this concludes our theology roundup for today. Next week, I don't know what the specific schedule is going to be. We're probably going to just dive right into an examination of Romans chapters 9, 10, and 11. Especially as we have to confront a great deal of supersessionism, replacement theology, but also reckon with non-Jewish believers being grafted into Israel's polity. All right, so let's move over now to our news roundup. We do the news roundup after the theology roundup because, of course, the news changes from day to day. It's time sensitive. And right now we are continuing to see a lot of changes, a lot of things going on, whether it's the Iranian situation, things unfolding here on the American home front. We've got a little bit of news from Russia, Ukraine. A lot of people are expecting, looking at the ongoing revolt, revolution, as it were, in Iran. We are expecting there to be some kind of point event in the not too distant future. But we're always reminded, number one, be praying for peace. Israel, Gaza, the Middle East, Iran. Number two, be praying for peace, Russia and Ukraine. And number three, be praying for reason and sanity to prevail here on the American home front. And that also involves the situation in Venezuela, how that might extend now. I mean, they're talking about regime change in Cuba. We've got the situation in Greenland. We've got the Epstein issue. I mean, we've got all kinds of things going on, which we need to be aware of. And the Lord is doubtlessly in charge, and the Lord loves all of these people. Okay, so all the news stories I'm about to go through, these are things which I encounter for the most part passively on social media, and you'll be able to look at them later today when this episode is archived at MessianicApologetics.net. All right, our first story, this is from Open Source Intel Defender, 1:54 p.m. yesterday, so this came up on my feed when we concluded yesterday. President Donald J. Trump is delaying a decision on striking Iran as the White House consults internally and with allies about the timing for such an operation and whether it would meaningfully destabilize the regime, according to 5 U.S., Israeli, and Arab sources with knowledge of the situation who spoke to Axios. And so here we see Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke to Trump on Wednesday and asked him to wait to give Israel more time to prepare for possible retaliation from Iran. An Israeli source said that in addition to concerns about retaliation, the current plan by the United States includes strikes on security force targets in Iran, but is not seen by Israel as strong or effective enough to meaningfully destabilize the Islamic regime. Okay, let's remember, and I said this yesterday, go back to last year, go back to last spring, how many events had to be stirred up, how much of a building momentum had to take place, how many public disagreements, which ultimately were for show, they were theater, had to occur in order for the 12-day war to start and ultimately for the U.S. to send in the B-2 bombers and end a great deal of the Iranian nuclear program. Whatever's going to happen in Iran now, it's going to be along similar lines. You're going to see some push and pull, some, well, Iran, we're going to give them a chance. We're going to give diplomacy a chance. And then what are we going to see? Many of us are of the opinion that we are moving towards some kind of a point event in this Iranian situation where outside forces are going to make themselves known. Of course, we wait and see, but we do need to pray for the people of Iran because it will change the face of the Middle East if the current regime is overthrown and the Shah returns. We see some kind of return to democracy, constitutional monarchy, something like that. It's going to change the Middle East, and we are going to be taking jumps forward toward the return of Yeshua, because there is going to be some kind of a period of peace and safety before the final end time scenario. Okay, so our next story, and this is from open source intel. This is from yesterday, 152. Axios, Netanyahu told Trump to wait as Israel needs more time to prepare, and Israel does not see the current U.S. plan against Iran as strong or effective enough. Okay, everyone, of course, has an opinion. That's not a problem. Now, here we see two stories back-to-back, open source intel. This is the first one I saw, 3:33 p.m. yesterday. Fox News reports U.S. military movements toward the Middle East, including an aircraft carrier and missile defense deployments. And then, of course, we had the Fox News story come up after that, and even a meme with an aircraft carrier. Setting the force, at least one U.S. aircraft carrier is being moved toward the Middle East as tensions with Iran continue to build, military sources confirmed to Fox News. So, and that's at 3:29 p.m. So reversed in terms of when they were actually posted. But the point is that before, the U.S. could have the option of intervening in the Iranian situation. We've got to move all our assets into the region and get prepared for what might happen. And of course, there's going to be, and this is just the way it is, there are going to be, people who, well, can we find a diplomatic solution? Is everyone really ready for a possible change? And then yesterday we talked about how various Arab countries in the region, well, do we really want to see them taken out? Because if the Iranian regime changes and it becomes friend of the United States, friend of Israel, friend of the West, and we see the Iranian support for terror stops, then what are you going to see regarding some of the other countries in the region? What has Qatar been doing? What has Saudi Arabia been doing? What have these other countries been doing regarding their possible support or sympathy toward, all these different inappropriate movements? So we continue to pray. We continue to watch. All right, so our next story, this is from open source intel. Yes. And here, this is from 4:49 p.m. yesterday, January 15th. There's a 59-cent clip. Second clip, excuse me. CNN, Iraqi militia fighters have entered Iran. That's Iraqi, so they're coming from Iraq. Have entered Iran in recent weeks to assist authorities in crushing the protest movement, according to a European military official and an Iraqi security source with direct knowledge of the deployments from Iraq. And the comment here is not good. Yes, not good, but it's also an indication of what? It's an indication of, and of course, 2 weeks ago, we were not anticipating what took place in Venezuela. U.S. Special Forces moving in and extracting, apprehending Nicolas Maduro. Nicolas Maduro was guarded not exclusively, but widely by Cubans. When a regime like that in Iran needs help from the outside, well, we need some people from Iraq, these Iraqi militias coming in. What does that signal? It signals, are they losing their grip on power? Are they really worried? They got to call in all of their proverbial favors from the outside. Okay, now we're going to change gears ever so slightly. I thought this was an important story to pass on. This is from Instagram yesterday. Babies born in 2026 will officially be known as the beta generation. Okay, so we all know about the baby boomers, Generation X, millennials, Generation Z. Maybe some of you all have heard of Generation Alpha. Well, now starting in 2026, according to this at least, any child born will be Generation Beta. Babies born in 2026 will mark the beginning of Generation Beta, the first generation to grow up completely surrounded by AI, automation, and constant digital innovation. While earlier generations adapted to technology over time, Generation Beta will know nothing else. Intelligent systems, data-driven education, and nonstop global connectivity will be their everyday reality. Welcome to the next chapter of humanity. Okay, so some of you all are not even that familiar with Generation Alpha. But now we have Generation Beta. And you know what? If I ever get married and have children, guess what? They're going to be members of Generation Beta. And I remember first hearing about Generation Beta a few years ago. They will be the first people to possibly see the 22nd century. So that's really heavy when you think about it. The 22nd century. That's when we start thinking about April the 6th, 2063, right? Oh, that's this century, but that's when we're supposed to make first contact with the Vulcans, according to the Star Trek universe. But the 22nd century, that's when the United Federation of Planets is founded. So, I mean, it's like you start thinking about sci-fi, you start thinking about technology, you start thinking about what's out there in the greater universe. I mean, that's how, and here we just read that Generation Beta, completely affected by technology, completely affected by AI. Yeah, what is going to happen? All right, so let's move back to the Middle East, and this has to do with the Gaza peace plan. Open source intel. This was 7:29 p.m. yesterday. Reposting something the President Trump put on his Truth Social platform. As Steve Witkoff announced, we have officially entered the next phase of Gaza's 20-point peace plan. Since the ceasefire, my team has helped deliver record levels of humanitarian aid to Gaza, reaching civilians at historic speed and scale. Okay, and then, as going down as chairman of the Board of Peace, I am backing a newly appointed Palestinian technocratic government, the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza, supported by the board's high representative, to govern Gaza during its transition. These Palestinian leaders are unwaveringly committed to a peaceful future. With the support of Egypt, Turkey, and Qatar, we will secure a comprehensive demilitarization agreement with Hamas, including the surrender of all weapons and the dismantling of every tunnel. Hamas must immediately honor its commitments, including the return of the final body to Israel, and proceed without delay to full demilitarization. Okay, and you can read the rest of this later. But, excuse me, in the second stage of this Gaza peace plan, we're supposed to see this technocratic administration put in Gaza. Now, next week, President Trump is supposed to be going to Davos, Switzerland for the World Economic Forum. We're probably going to hear more about his Board of Peace. those are supposed to be involved with this, and even though I didn't get the story listed, I saw that he's supposed to have probably have a special meeting with President al-Sisi of Egypt. So while the Iranian situation is unfolding and we don't quite know what's going to happen there, things are happening in Gaza. Of course, people are also speculating, well, this board of peace, this Gaza, bringing all these countries in, is that the covenant with many? How is that associated? Are we going to have 3.5 years of peace and 3.5 years of great tribulation? People are talking, and we just have to monitor and watch. Okay, Candace Owens. Okay. All right, Candace Owens. Here's a story which I normally don't pass on anything from Alex Jones. But here, Alex Jones, if he says it, take note of this. This was posted yesterday at 6:29 p.m. Twilight Zone alert. Candace Owens says Charlie Kirk was U.S. government-sponsored time traveler and she is a space alien. In this report, Alex Jones asks his supporters to pray for Candace Owens, and Jones goes on to ask her family to please intervene now before more damage is done. So Alex Jones has come to the conclusion that Candace Owens has really gone insane. And, Alex Jones isn't exactly known himself for being stable, right? So if Alex Jones says that Candace Owens, by his standards, is off, that means she is really, really off. And yet, one of the questions which is doubtlessly being asked, especially in what took place last weekend in Jackson, Mississippi, the arsonist claiming this was a synagogue of Satan, was he at all influenced by a person like Candace Owens? All right, so this is from yesterday. This is Fox News clip, 2 minutes, 30 seconds. Brett Baer, Fox News can tonight confirm military assets are moving toward the Middle East after a recent withdrawal of Navy firepower in the region. So, yes. And of course, you probably have also seen some things about Qatar because, of course, the U.S. has a big military base in Qatar. What can the U.S. do? What can the U.S. not do? So, yeah, naval assets, of course, have to be moved in if Qatar puts some restrictions on the U.S. But this is something which changes. Any of you who have a military background or you have family in the military, military situations change on a dime. So we don't know how much of this is going to also change over the weekend or in the next week. But it would seem logical if there's going to be some kind of point event and the U.S. is going to take some kind of action against the Iranian regime on behalf of those revolting against it, we've got to move all our puzzle pieces, all of our chess pieces into their proper places. And that doesn't happen instantaneously. Okay, no, that is not the story I wanted to refer to. Okay, let me go back in my notes and get the story. But one important story which we want to take note of is, okay, here it is. This is from Hen Mazig. Yes, I got the name right. Madonna speaking up for Iran while so many of her colleagues remain silent. Thank you for the moral courage. So here, this was posted yesterday afternoon, 5:22. Madonna, who I probably disagree on most life and human issues with, is not somebody I particularly admire. I don't listen to her music. Here, Madonna, while most of those on the progressive left, Hollywood entertainment types, broadly silent about the issue of Iran, Madonna has come through and said that she stands with those who want to free Iran from its current government and Islamic dictatorship. So we got to recognize Madonna saying the right thing at the right time. Okay. Our next story, and this is from Fox News. Some of you all are aware how the recipient of the Nobel Prize, Maria Corina Machado, the leader of the Venezuelan opposition, gave her Nobel Peace Prize to President Trump. And there's a Fox News interview, 27 seconds. He deserves it. Nobel Peace Prize winner Maria Corina Machado sits down with Campos Duffy to share the emotional moment she presented President Trump with her Nobel Peace Prize. So I know a lot of people, in terms of end time speculation, Trump being the peace president and everything, they say, well, this indicates possibly that Trump is the beast, or at least he's going to be the precursor to the beast. We don't know. From open source intel today, January the 16th, 5:02 a.m. Iran's communication minister, Issa Zarapur, said on state television that the nationwide internet shutdown imposed on December the 28th will continue indefinitely for security reasons, with no full restoration expected before Nowruz in late March. That's the Iranian New Year. State media, IRNA, echoed the statement, citing foreign influence. Independent outlets BBC Persian and Reuters reported the same timeline based on official comments and internal memos. So, of course, this is a situation which can change, but the internet in Iran is apparently going to be out for the next 2.5 to 3 months or so. Yeah, I don't see the Western powers, especially the United States, Israel, allowing something like that to just go on indefinitely. Because with the internet out and with Starlink possibly being jammed, having different issues, how is the wider world at large going to get information regarding what is happening with the people? How many have been arrested, murdered, executed, silenced, beaten, whatever it is? Okay, so here we have one from, again, open source intel, posted 5:29 a.m. Iran, total economic collapse, martial law, and endless IRGC suppression forces. And there's a 20-second clip there. So economic collapse, martial law, those are big things to keep in mind. Now, let's change gears to the Far East. Right now, as we speak, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney is making a visit to China. And here, there's a clip, 25 seconds, 1:19 a.m., open source intel. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney meets with Xi Jinping in China. And this is what's getting a lot of people upset. The progress we have made in the partnership sets us up well for the New World Order. Now, one of the things I know, and we've gone back and forth with this, and I, for example, at different Messianic events, and I said this to somebody who was from Canada. I said, "Hey, are you going to be the 51st state? You know, should we all be looking for the 60-star flag?" We kind of joke about it and have a good time. But more realistically, the Trump administration wanting to be nationalistic, America first, taking care of the Western Hemisphere. Look at what just took place in Venezuela. A lot of that had to do with lessening Russian, Chinese, Iranian influence. And what about Canada? Well, Canada actually does have a huge amount of Chinese influence on it. And to see the Canadian Prime Minister use the terminology New World Order is not very positive. But this is something which, of course, can change. And we pray for our brothers and sisters in the Great North. Okay, so we got 5 more stories to go through. Okay, here's one. Visegrad 24. Excuse me. This was posted 8:48 a.m. Czech President Petr Pavel said that Ukraine is ready to make a number of painful concessions in order to end the conflict. Petr Pavel also stated that Czechia, currently provides around 50% of the ammunition supplies to the Ukrainian armed forces under its own shell procurement initiative. Okay, we do pray for peace, Russia, Ukraine, and here, of course, this can change. We've seen so many things the past year, Russia, Ukraine, so many false starts for peace, but at least the headline was Ukraine is ready to make painful concessions. Okay, here's another one from Visegrad 24, which should be a little concerning, considering the changing factors in the Middle East. This was posted at 9:01 a.m. today. Bloomberg reports that Saudi Arabia is finalizing a trilateral military pact with Egypt and Somalia, with special focus on Red Sea security and defense cooperation. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia is also forming a second trilateral defense pact with Pakistan and Turkey, according to Pakistan's Defense Production Minister Raza Hayat Haraj. So here, this just gives you a map. Now here at the bottom, Forbes writes that Saudi Arabia's new alliances reflect a shift towards self-security and an effort to make the country less reliant on its alliance with the U.S. I mean, we were talking about, less than 2 months ago, Saudi Arabia joining the Abraham Accords, and now we see this. Okay, so here, of course, you see the different countries in view: Pakistan, Turkey, Egypt, Somalia, Saudi Arabia, and just this past week or so, when we were gone at the IMCS Rabbis Conference, the state of Israel recognized Somaliland, which is located right here. And of course, the purpose is, more than anything else, to establish appropriate alliances. And here you have the Red Sea. These are important shipping lanes, right? The Persian Gulf, this is where a huge amount of the world's oil comes from, goes through here, goes out here. And of course, all of the shipping from Asia to Europe and even to North America. So we know this is a situation which can also change. So just keep that in mind. But a lot of shifting alliances. But the point of the article was Saudi Arabia wants to rely less on the United States. So what's going to happen in the Middle East? Especially if the current Iranian regime is taken out and you see a more democratic, progressive, and I mean that lowercase p for the Middle East, government brought into power. I mean, we don't know. Okay. So Visegrad 24, we got 3 stories left. Martial law has been imposed in most cities across Iran, and there's a clip here you can watch. That's 9:08 a.m. Okay, this is back to Russia, Ukraine. Visegrad 24, 8:41 a.m. Agreements with the U.S. on guarantees for Ukraine's security may be signed in Davos next week. President Zelensky said that he hopes to sign an agreement on U.S. security guarantees and a prosperity deal on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos next week. So what's going to happen at the World Economic Forum? We have to wait till next week, obviously. But the topic of Russia, Ukraine has not been forgotten. And then our final story, and this is what I saw before getting prepped for our live stream today, posted at 11:52 a.m. This is the president posting on his Truth Social platform. In a post earlier on Truth Social by President Donald J. Trump, the president praised the Iranian regime's decision to cancel the hanging of 800 protesters scheduled for Thursday, stating, "I greatly respect the fact that all scheduled hangings, which were to take place yesterday, over 800 of them, have been canceled by the leadership of Iran. Thank you." And yes, we're doubtlessly overjoyed that these public executions have been canceled. But we know that there continues to be a lot of people being harmed by the current Iranian government as they stand up against it. They protest, they go on strike, they revolt. President Trump has said help is on the way. It appears that different puzzle pieces, different chess pieces are being put in their proper place. We definitely go day to day. We know things can change very, very quickly. We pray for reason and sanity to prevail. We also pray for evil to be defeated, but we pray for wisdom and discernment to know how this possibly, plays into the end time scenario. Because there are a lot of things we don't know about the end time scenario more than anything else because of just changing world dynamics. So the Lord is in control, and we know that certainly we're going to be monitoring different matters over the weekend. All right, so that finishes up our news roundup. And we had a short week coming back from the IMCS Rabbis Conference. So next week, we'll be going 5 times, pending world circumstances, of course. And it's my plan for us to get into a multi-part series on Romans chapters 9, 10, and 11. As always, on behalf of Messianic Apologetics, I would like to sincerely thank you for your ongoing prayers, encouragement, and support for all of our ministry efforts. If you have not already, please do visit my website, messianicapologetics.net. If that's too difficult for you to remember, we also have the website address, messianic.faith. And that's something you can very easily remember and give out to your friends and others. And please, if you have not already, be sure to give this episode a thumbs up or a heart, and it will help its exposure on social media. We will see you again on Monday with another episode of Messianic Insider. Until then, may God bless you. Shabbat Shalom, and take care.